Good evening. I'm Janice Rayford, second Vice President of the Board of Directors of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, the Manhattan chapter. On behalf of the Manhattan chapter, Board of Directors, and the entire membership, welcome and happy Women's History Month. Our extraordinary program for Women's History Month 2022 features our speaker, Jennifer Jones Austin, Esquire. We thank her for accepting our invitation. But before we get to Jennifer Jones Austin, Esquire, I'm just going to give you a little history about the coalition. National Coalition of 100 Black Women started in 1970, right here in New York City. However, the Manhattan chapter was chartered in 1992. We are celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. NCBW is a 501c3 nonprofit national volunteer organization, and we foster equal rights, and we develop the potential of our members and respond to specific local and national issues that supports Black women and girls. We believe through our efforts, we will fulfill our vision of seeing Black women and girls living in a world where socioeconomic inequality does not exist. Well, tonight, we will have a conversation about Black women of faith and social justice. And we invite you, our attendees, to join the conversation. And we invite you to do that by placing your questions in the chat. And those are questions for our guest speaker. We will curate and have answers for you, as many as the time allows. We also want you to participate by making a donation to NCBW Manhattan chapter today. Your tax-deductible donation will provide the resources to further our mission, especially for Black women and girls. But we can't do it without you. So visit our website, www.ncbwmanhattan.org. Once again, www.ncbwmanhattan.org. And then click on the donate button. Joining the program is very important for you to donate. And I want to tell you to stay connected with us on social media. We're on all the platforms: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And so we want to see you. We want to hear from you. Tell us what you want us to be doing and in the community. Next, I'd like to introduce you to our first Vice President of Programs of NCBW Manhattan Chapter, Madam Jennifer Gaston. Jennifer.
Thank you, Janet. It's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker for the evening, Jennifer Jones Austin, Esquire. In alignment with our theme tonight, Jennifer is the fourth generation leader of faith and social justice. She fights for equity. She is currently the CEO of the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies, which is an anti-poverty policy and advocacy organization with 170 members and faith partners. She has led and secured monumental changes in social policy to strengthen and empower the disenfranchised and marginalized. Jennifer brings her work a profound understanding of the link between race, poverty, law, and social policy in America, and the role religion plays. Informing her current role and her work is her experience as the senior vice president, past experience as the senior vice president of the United Way of New York City. She was also the City of New York's very first Family Services Coordinator. She was Deputy Commissioner for the New York City Administration for Children's Services, Civil Rights Deputy Bureau Chief for Attorney General Eliot Spitzer, and Vice President for Learn Now Edison Schools Incorporated. She's also informed by her tremendous work in advocacy. She has chaired several influential boards and commissions. Currently, she chairs the New York City Racial Justice Commission, which is the first of its kind in the nation. It was created to develop ballot proposals to revise the city's charter, to dismantle structural racism in government functions and ensure equity for Black, Indigenous, and other persons of color. She also currently serves as the vice chair of the board of the National Action Network. She's a member of the Ferrick Center for Social Justice Advisory Board, a member of the Center for Law, Brain, and Behavior Advisory Board at Harvard. She's also a member of the COVID-19 Roll Up Your Sleeves Task Force, created to ensure vaccine information and equitable access in Black and Brown communities. And finally, she's a scholar in residence at Nyack College and Alliance Theological Seminary for Racial Reconciliation. I can't imagine a more important topic at this time. You also may have seen Jennifer. She is an expert national speaker. She's a local speaker. She's often called upon for her expertise. But you also may have heard her as a co-host of WBLS's Open Line. And she also guest hosts weekly the nationally syndicated radio program, Keeping It Real, with Reverend Al Sharpton. Or maybe you've read, and if you haven't, it should be required reading for all, Jennifer Jones Austin's book, Consider It Pure Joy. A number of us have read it, and it is the account of her year-long battle with a sudden life-threatening illness and the power of faith and community to transform desperation into joy. And I just want to say, in one of the quotes, and I believe it was from your father, Jennifer, and he said, we're all going through something. We're either coming out of something, we are in something right now, or we're about to go into something. And I appreciated that, because as we think about the last 2 or 3 years, it's those are the stories that you hear from everyone. And so, your inspirational book, it was just an inspiring experience. I can't, I'm going off script now, so I don't want to go on and on. But again, I think that's what makes it required reading. It's inspirational and it's comforting to folks at this time, especially in our community. So lastly, Jennifer is a graduate of the Fordham University School of Law, NYU's Robert F. Wagner Graduate School of Public Service, Rutgers University. She's a recipient of numerous awards and recognitions, including 2 honorary doctorates and 4 honors bestowed on her by her 3 alma maters. Most importantly, she has 2 beautiful children. She is a Brooklyn girl. She resides in Brooklyn right now. She's coming to us from Brooklyn, New York, and she lives with her husband. Welcome, Jennifer Jones Austin. We look forward to your comments this evening.
Oh, I am excited and delighted, feeling immensely blessed to be with all of you. Was just so moved and touched when I got the call, the invitation. First to my good friend Janice Rayford, and then meeting Nancy and coming to know several of you. It's just been a joy and a pleasure, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to be able to share with you all this evening. Such, esteemed women. I should be listening to you all and learning from you all. So hopefully, there'll be something that I say that reaches and touches you. But, like I said, I could be learning and listening to each and every one of you, and I know that. So I'm just going to count this a moment where God has said, okay, maybe you have a word for them, and I'm going to do my best to try to find that word and bring it forward. I want to quickly say that the bio, sometimes I send the bio just so you can pick and choose, like, that which may be relevant or something that you read that resonates. I get a little embarrassed sometimes when people say it all because it's like, ooh, all everybody needs to know about me is that I'm a child of God, and that I feel immensely blessed to be living what I know in my heart of heart is a purpose-driven life. That God has blessed me with the days and the years that I've had, and hopefully there'll be many, many more to do the work that He has put me on this earth to do. And the same can be said for each and every one of us. I firmly believe, and if you read my book, in my book I write about me sharing with my children at a very challenging time, that I believe God gives us life to help fulfill God's purposes. And when we fulfill God's purposes, God calls us home. Not a moment before or not a second later. When we've done all that God has purposed us to do, it's time for us to go on home. So I'm here living every day like you because I have purpose. You all have purpose. And so tonight I'm going to share a little bit of some of what I believe my purpose has been and what I'm trying to do. I'll begin by telling you all that there are many circles in which I move where my father precedes me. My father was a faith leader, a very prominent faith and social justice leader. My father was the president of the New York chapter of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference when King was president of the national body. My father was the president of Operation Breadbasket, which was the economic justice arm of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. In addition, and I think it's okay to say it and claim it, he was respected as one of the greatest preachers with immense oratorical gift during his time on this earth and his preaching period. And so there are many circles that I move in just because of my faith, my work in faith and social justice as the head of the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies, my service as the vice chair, the first vice chair and the first female to sit in a leadership role at the National Action Network. I am in the space with a lot of faith leaders. And so very often people will connect me with my father. I will tell you that I spent the first, I'd say probably 25 years of my career not letting people know who my daddy was. Not because I was ashamed, but because I could bring it on my own. And I didn't need, to kind of rely upon him. I could do it on my own. Not that I was shying away. It didn't seem that it was like important. I had my skills, I had my abilities, I had my talents, I could move. So again, in many spaces, people will refer to my dad, but what I'm gonna do right now is share a little bit of background about my mother, because I think you get an even greater sense of who I am and how I show up in this world because of her. So my mother grew up in Kentucky, Black girl, grown up in Kentucky, not the deep South, but South enough. And she determined that she wanted to be in the arts when she grew up. She wanted to be an art historian. She wanted to be an art curator, an art consultant, work in the museums or wherever. She was very much into the visual arts. And she told her teachers that she wanted to be in the arts. And they told her, aside from the drama arts, TV and dancing and music and performing, there was really no career in the arts, in art history for a little Black girl. She went on to become the first Black person to lead a Fortune 500 corporate art collection. She founded and built from the ground up the AT&T corporate art collection back in the late 70s to the mid 90s. She had annually anywhere from a $2 million to $12 million budget. And she traveled the world buying and commissioning works of art to hang all across the world in AT&T buildings. She actually brought along with her a lot of Black artists, giving them space that they otherwise would not have occupied. She was a role model and inspiration. Now, the interesting thing about Mom was that she got married to my father when she was just 18. She dropped out of college and married him. She married this, very powerful, very statuesque man who was very much in command of himself. And she struggled to find herself in the marriage and herself. 18 years old, coming from the South, marrying this larger than life figure. She struggled and went back to school at 29. Still struggled though. Got her college degree, and in her late 30s determined that she was kind of suffocating in the marriage. She divorced my father. At the time, she had 4 children, and she had 3 girls. Her 3 girls were in their, I was 10, my sister closest in age to me was 12, and my oldest sister was 19. She began telling her daughters, as she was raising them, she broke out of comfort zone, if you will. Prominent, but you know the story of Black ministers and first ladies and whatever. She had the good life, and he was a very prominent minister. She had to find her way. And she had these little girls who were watching her. She began telling her daughters 3 things. She'd say, get your degrees before you get married. Because she dropped out of college, and then she had to struggle and work her way back with 4 children. She'd say, get your degrees before you get married. She'd say, have as many children as you want, because at the end of the day, they're yours to raise. My father was traveling the country. He was traveling the world. The responsibility of raising children, especially back in that time, fell largely upon her, but especially with a very prominent husband. And then she'd say, and keep yourself looking good because you never know. And Natalie Jones kept herself looking good. Now, here's the deal. She had these young daughters, and we took her words literally. Before I got married, I got my undergraduate degree and I got my law degree. Have as many children as you want, because at the end of the day, they're yours to raise. God blessed me with two children, and that allowed me to also keep going with my career. And keep yourself looking good. I've tried my best. I can't say that I've kept it at Natalie Jones' standards, but I've tried my best. When I got to about 40 years of age, I realized that not only did Mom's words have literal meaning, but they also had symbolic meaning, and that I had learned to apply those words to my career. Get your degrees before you get married. What I realized was that was all about preparing yourself for the life you want to live, the career that you want to have, how you want to show up in the world. Prepare yourself, do the work, so that as you try to step into that next thing, people can't say you're not qualified. Let's just take a look right now at what's happening down in Washington, D.C. with Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. She did the work. She prepared herself for this moment. That's getting your degrees before you get married, before you step into that next. Do the work. They may try to come at you. They may try to kind of knock you off your game. But if you've done the work to prepare yourself, if you've got your qualifications in place, all they can do is try to chip away, but they really can't. They can't cut your legs out from under you. And that's what we're seeing happening. Have as many children as you want, because at the end of the day, they're yours to raise. What Mom was telling us is, be careful of what you take on if you have certain goals, aspirations. You can't do it all. Try to figure out what you can do and do it well so that you have the impact that you desire. Translation. What I've learned throughout my career is there's but so much I can do and do it well. So I try to live a life where I center on the needs of my community and how I show up for my community, programmatically, policy-wise, and at a structural change level. So if you think about what you learned about my background, it's all connected. It's all tied to community and racial and social justice. Everything I take on is related to that because I can't do everything and do it well. Have as many children as you want because at the end of the day, they're yours to raise. It's all about what you can take on and do well and being smart and thoughtful about it. And keep yourself looking good because you never know. I thought Mom was telling us, you know what? You may marry the person who you think is like, the end all be all. And you may find in your marriage or in your relationship that you're missing something that you feel, keeps you from being who you were purposed to be. And so you may have to find somebody else. That's what I thought she was saying. And you don't want to be caught out there not having your stuff together. Maybe that's what she was saying. But what I've come to appreciate is that what Mom was also helping us to understand is, in this world of where you're always trying to bring your best foot forward and doing the work that you feel called and purposed to do, you've got to show up with your A game. And so keep yourself looking good because you never know means, always presenting yourself in the most positive and impactful way. I tell young people all the time, you're always interviewing. You're always interviewing. Not just, when you land that interview for that next opportunity, but how you show up in your daily walk, how you show up on the job, how you show up in your relationships with friends, with family, with acquaintances, with people who are in the organizations that you are blessed to be in. You're interviewing, people see you, and you never know where that next opportunity may come from. I literally have gotten some of the most impactful positions in my career just by showing up and bringing my whole self and being the best person I can be. Before we got on the Zoom this evening, I was sharing that my son, my 20-year-old son, who lives out in California and is playing baseball and is a D1 baseball player and is on the National Honor Society for the University of Southern California, put his best foot forward on Instagram. And would you believe Tom Brady, the GOAT of football, found him, and he is now one of 5 athletes who was selected to promote the Brady brand, which just dropped today. And if you know anything about sports, Tom Brady, he's bigger, I hate to say it, but he's bigger than LeBron James. And my son, just by showing up, he's now in with Tom Brady. So what I want you to appreciate is, yes, you heard my bio, but it's the footnotes. It's those experiences, it's those those moments, those exchanges that won't necessarily appear in a bio or in a resume that have made all the difference. One of them being, when I went to work at the United Way of New York City, as the senior vice president, I showed up and brought my whole self to the job, believing that I was there to affect change at the community for my brothers and sisters struggling every day due to structural racism and biased systems, institutional policies and practices that keep people from getting ahead, and especially Black women, centering on issues like wage deprivation, with Black women earning 64 cents the dollar for every dollar earned by a white man, and what the implications of that are. We are the primary breadwinners, in the majority of our households, sometimes the only breadwinners. When we make 62 cents on the dollar, despite being the most educated segment of our society, that impacts our families. This is why 1 in 4 Black children live in poverty compared to less than 1 in 10 white children. This is why Black women, when their careers are done, it is estimated that we will have earned $1 million fewer than white men, which contributes then to our inability to live, economically stable throughout our lives. So I went to United Way to center on those issues. Well, one day I heard that there were some Black women on the job talking about me. So if you know anything about me, and Janice has come to know a lot about me, I'm all about the fierce conversation. I heard that these women were talking about me and that they were saying, I walk in my power. So, that bothered me because I thought to myself, are these women saying that I'm kind of carried away with my title as senior vice president, C-suite, senior vice president? Are they saying that I'm arrogant, that I'm title driven, that I engage with them in condescending ways? That bothered me because I thought, that's not who I am. What am I giving off that would make them think this way about me? So I went up to them. It was a group of Black women one evening, and I said to them, I hear you talking about me. I hear you saying I walk in my power. What does that mean? What these women told me is something that I pray I never forget. They said, to walk in your power means that you walk with a sense of purpose and determination given you by God, as though you're on assignment from God to do the things that God has purposed you to do. That's what walking in your power means. And from that day forward, I'm like, I am going to walk in my power whenever, however, whatever. Walking in your power means that you believe that you've been placed on this earth, my sisters, to do the work that God has purposed you to do. That you're on assignment to do that work in a way that nobody else can. That you show up bringing your whole self, putting on the full armor of God, not fearing man, because you have been created by God himself, God herself, to do the work. And so you show up with that sense of purpose, right? Doesn't mean you're telling off people, but it means that you show up with this conviction that God has you in this space to do a certain thing and that you're going to do it to the best of your ability. I like to lean on the words of Anna Julia Cooper, the fourth Black woman to earn a PhD, an educator and scholar. Anna Julia Cooper said, only the Black woman can say, when and where I enter, in the quiet, undisputed dignity of my womanhood, without violence and without suing or special patronage, then and there, the whole race enters with me, the whole Negro race. What Anna Julia Cooper was saying was that it is the Black woman who carries the burdens of this society. She carries the experience of being a Black woman, marginalized, just at every turn, the subject of misogyny, of sexism and racism. She carries that double-edged sword. She lives it on a daily basis. Her children are afflicted with it, and she carries their wounds. The men in her lives, her father, maybe the man in her life, her sons, carry it through, wrongful arrest, injustice, incarceration. She herself is wrongfully arrested and incarcerated. She carries it in the mistreatment when it comes to healthcare, wage deprivation, as I talked about just a minute ago. She carries it all. And so when she shows up, she brings it into the room. And she also has the responsibility of saying, I am here because God made me, uniquely and wonderfully made me. And I'm showing up in my entire being. I'm not denying my womanhood, and I'm not denying my Blackness. And I'm going to show up with all God has given me. That's just what I'm trying to be. For every day that I have on this earth, to live as God purposed me to live, to do the work God has called me to do. So that's who I am. And God has positioned me and placed me, I believe, because I'm leaning into successive roles of leadership to, as my daddy would say, find a field and leave it better than I found it, to veto the lies, to say no to the untruths, to use my ability, my allegiance to the cross and not to the flag, to speak truth to power. That's who I am.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was powerful. You want to keep on talking?
I'm here if you want to ask questions.
Yeah, we definitely came up with some questions. Janice and I and Janera, we kind of put them into 3 buckets: women's empowerment, leadership, and managing through these challenging times. So I'm going to kick it off. And for those of you who do not know me, I'm Nancy Victor Green, and I am honored to be the president of the Manhattan chapter. So I'm going to kick it off. Our community has a lot of work to do. Closing the persistent wealth gap, fighting the criminal legal justice system over incarceration of Black and brown people, fixing an education system that remains hyper-segregated and fails to provide education that could unlock the potential of the next generation. How can women of faith best use all our assets, physical and financial, to bring an end to these examples of injustice and inequality?
So first, let me just say that I appreciate your leaning into this issue. What is so often happening right now, and understandably so, is that we're centering a lot on voting, which is critically important, no doubt. We've been centering a lot on injustice in policing and racial injustice in policing, which is so critically important, no doubt, no argument here. But what happens is, by centering on those issues in the main, we lose sight of the fact that racism pervades every pillar of our society. And that by design, you know, that old kind of Monte Carlo, the okie doke, they've got you looking over here at these 2 things while they continue to do what they're doing in these other spaces. That's the game plan here. You know, as we continue to push, as they're dismantling voting rights, they continue to break down, you know, the education system that they know is what is, like, you know, kind of the game changer for many children in our communities. They continue, keep in mind, we start centering on voting rights and the dismantling of voting rights. We keep centering on the lack of a George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, right? And while we're doing that, Joe Biden's desire to raise the minimum wage, that was just put to the wayside. Nobody's even talking about it anymore. And I'll center on that just for a second to say, to close the racial wealth gap, we've got to begin with the fact that this nation intentionally undercounts poverty. And who suffers the most with poverty? Disproportionately, people of color. Let me just give you this very quick example of what I'm talking about. In America, the federal poverty level for a family of 3, so let's just talk about a woman and 2 children. Family of 3 living anywhere in America needs only $21,800 to technically be considered not living in poverty. Anywhere in America, $21,800. In New York City, in the Bronx, which is considered to be the most affordable borough in New York City, the women's self-sufficiency standard, when you look at the cost of housing, childcare, transportation, healthcare costs, and other incidental costs, a mother with 2 children needs at least $81,000. When the federal government says that anywhere in America you need only $21,800, that justifies a federal minimum wage of $7.25, because annualized, that's $15,000. So all they really need to do is to close the gap of about $7,000 with food supports, with the child care subsidy, that type of thing. And they cut off child care subsidies, housing subsidies at 200% of poverty, which is 21,800 times 2. That's a little less than 40, that's a little more than 43,000. So a mother making 50,000 with 2 children is not poor, and she's not eligible for child care subsidy. She's not eligible for housing. She's not eligible for some food supports. And who is deprived of wages? in the main, Black women and women of Hispanic origin, which is why our children are living in poverty. This is structural. The federal government knows what it's doing. It's intentional. Now, I just gave you that example because what we need to be doing as women, women of faith, women in leadership, we need to be centering on these structural laws that allow for intergenerational poverty in our communities to persist. Yes, we need to be pushing for greater education supports for our children. Yes, we need to be pushing for greater community supports, centered on health and mental health. But we've got to educate ourselves about these structural laws that keep us from getting ahead. Because what happens with policies and with legislation, they're like Band-Aids. We come in, and Martin Luther King Jr. understood this. You pass legislation and you pass policies, but if you haven't dealt with the underlying structural racism, it's just a Band-Aid approach. So one of the things I'll quickly share with you all, and I'd love your help on this. I chair the New York City Racial Justice Commission, created to begin to dismantle structural racism in government functioning, beginning here in New York City. On the New York City general election ballot in November, there are going to be 3 ballot measures, all designed to begin to advance racial justice and equity here in New York City. There's going to be a measure centered on a preamble that says that New York City has engaged in structural racism and it's got to stop, and that we as a city embrace our multicultural society and advancing equity for everybody. There's going to be a ballot measure that says that New York City needs to establish an Office of Racial Equity. Like we have an NYPD, we have a fire department, we have children's services, we have human resources, we have a Department of Environmental Protection. It would establish in the city's constitution an Office of Racial Equity, requiring every city agency to develop on a every 2-year basis a plan for bringing about racial equity in hiring, promotions, in services, and attaching budgets to it to make sure that these programs and services are adequately funded. And thirdly, there'll be a ballot measure to establish a true cost of living measurement that would measure what it costs to live in New York City, what it costs for housing, childcare, transportation, health costs, food. And if we have that in particular passed, it becomes a game changer for negotiating wages in the private sector, in labor. It gives people agency to say, you can't pay me minimum wage and think that's good enough. We need New Yorkers, and I'm speaking to you as an advocate, not in my role as the chair of the commission, but as an advocate. We need our people in our communities to know about these ballot measures and vote for them. New York City can be the linchpin, the domino that sets this entire nation on a course for embedding racial equity in government functioning. So what I'm saying to you is that we need to take up the centering on these structural issues. Racism pervades every pillar of our society. And when we hold government accountable for advancing racial equity and undoing injustice, then we're doing the work.
That was powerful. And yes, we will join you on that mission. Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Is it my turn? My turn to ask a question?
Yes, it's your
Yes?
turn.
All right, my turn. Okay, I'm so excited. And Jennifer, we're going to move to the category of leadership, and this was actually a question that I'm particularly interested in. You know, the last 3 years, as you know, as we've discussed, have been, you know, challenging for a lot of us, right? I mean, we've had the COVID crisis, we've had a crisis in social justice. We're looking at a mental health crisis in this country, right? I mean, there was one in our community, and now, you know, it's everybody's crisis, right? Always was. And there's also now a war in Ukraine. You know, just let's just add more fun, right? How have these experiences, you know, and this is a great question for you, how have they impacted or evolved your leadership style over the last few years?
So I'll begin with centering on vulnerability.
Mm,
One of the things that I learned as a leader very early on in the crisis was that you know, I didn't have the answers, and I couldn't fake it. I didn't know what I didn't know, and everybody knew that I didn't know, right? I didn't know how long we were going to be at this. I didn't know if the measures we were taking, you know, we were doing all that we could to keep people safe and keep the organization moving ever forward in a positive direction. I didn't know how we would be impacted as an organization financially. I didn't know how people were going to show up on any given day. And so I had to be vulnerable.
mm,
I had to embrace my vulnerability and evidence vulnerability, because what I realized that in doing so, it allowed other leaders in my organization, as well as the staff, to be vulnerable. And in so doing, I got to learn where people were at before we reached within our organization a crisis. People were bringing to me their issues before they became problems. Do you understand? Like when a leader is vulnerable, it gives everybody else license to be vulnerable. When a leader is okay with saying, I don't have all the answers, it gives others in the organization license to say, I don't have the answers either, and to work together as a team. I learned a lot more about listening, not just to say I was listening, but to listen for solutions from places that I didn't necessarily think that they would have come from, right?
yeah.
Listening as an example, and I'm just going to be honest with you all. Listening to the experiences of the people who run the facilities at FPWA, about the challenges that they were seeing in their communities. Because the people who run our facilities are some of what I've sought to do. I'll tell you over the course of my tenure at FPWA, it is the people who work facilities who have had their incomes double in the 10 years that I've been there, because they often are the lowest paid people. But, you know, still, they may still be among the lower paid people in the organization. Listening to them about what they were experiencing helped me to appreciate about what others were experiencing, you know, people who are challenged mentally and economically, health-wise, and other. And that helped me to center on what are the things that we as an organization need to be doing to help meet the community where the community is. Listening to them when they, you know, and hearing their fears. You know, everybody was able to work from home at my organization because we were a policy and advocacy organization. The facilities people, though, you know, they didn't have a whole lot to do, you know, at home. But I determined early on that if we were going to keep everybody on staff, they were going to be on staff too. We were not letting them go. But it was only from listening to them, knowing that, you know, I couldn't turn my backs on them and keep everybody else in a good place. So listening to people for guidance and information from places and spaces where I otherwise would have thought that maybe it wouldn't, you know, it wouldn't be coming. And then the other thing that I learned was that, how do I best say this? That even I, as a Black woman, needed to appreciate the bias that I may sometimes hold. It was through COVID that, as you all have been hearing about the Great Resignation, people here and there taking flight from their positions. And some of you may be doing it too. And the churn is good in some respects. Well, I realized that I had the person who was leading my faith department had always been men. And the most recent one during COVID left. And I started looking outward again. But there was a Black woman on staff who frankly was the one holding it down. He was like kind of the figurehead, and she was holding it down. And I started looking outward. And all of a sudden, she held her hand up and said, "Hey, what about me?" And I'm like, how could I be a Black woman, always concerned about lifting Black women, but essentially I was doing it externally, and I wasn't looking at the Black woman right in my organization as capable, if not more capable, than the men who preceded her. I had to embrace during this moment of racial reckoning, how I too had, was kind of like falling victim to a racist, sexist system. And I wasn't seeing my Black sister. I knew she was doing the work and making it happen, but I wasn't seeing she was ready for leadership. So, COVID and all that happened, disproportionately affecting our people caused me to lean in. And so, I'm hoping that I'm coming out of this a more vulnerable leader, a leader who's listening more, and a leader who's being more reflective and looking at how I'm showing up.
Fantastic. I want to, before we move on to Janice, who's going to ask our next question, I do want to encourage everyone. It shouldn't just be us. We don't have all the questions here, so please do place your question in the chat as we continue on with the Q&A with Ms. Austin. Janice?
Janet.
Okay, thank you, Janera. I have a question for you, Jennifer. I really appreciate having you here tonight. And it's about it's under our managing through challenging times efforts. And the question is, HBCUs have received bomb threats. 57 institutions have been targeted just this year in 2022. There has been an uptick in the creation of white supremacy groups, an uptick in hate crimes. Is racism one of the greatest threats to disturbing national security?
So racism has, from the very beginning of the founding of this nation, in my estimation, been our greatest threat and continues to be. And the reason being is that, we all know in our households, when we are divided, we're not strong. When we are united and we see ourselves as, one body, we're more effective. You all know through the coalition, then, the National Coalition of Black Women, when you are unified and united, you're stronger than when we are divided. And racism from the beginnings of this society has sought to divide us as a human race, and it continues. So, I believe that it continues to be our greatest threat because, just think about it this way. We have a society right now where we can't even get voting straight because there's this belief that some people should be able to vote and others not. Because the threat, the white supremacist, the white nationalist feels threatened as this nation moves from being majority minority to minority majority. So this nation, the white supremacists and nationalists are concerned that very soon in the next like 15 to 20 years, that people of color will, in terms of the voting populace, will outnumber white people and they will become the minority. So that's why they're trying to cut off our voting rights and shut this down, right? Critical race theory. The reason that they're pushing back on it is because they know that when you teach Black children critical race theory, it is empowering. They know these bomb threats that the HBCUs are empowering our Black young men and women, right? They know it's an empowering tool. And they know that when you teach critical race theory, that the little white children, for them, it's disempowering. When you teach critical race theory, you tell Black people, young and old, that the reason that they and their families have struggled is not because they're less than. It's not because they're less intelligent, less smart, less capable. It's not because they're lazy. It's because the system has been structured to work against them. When you help them appreciate how wage deprivation keeps Black women from being able to provide for their families, and that wage deprivation is structural. It's by design. That empowers them, gives them a greater sense of self to stand up against these injustices. And when you tell the little white child that her family is not smarter, that it's not that her grandparents or her great-grandparents were better than, more capable, that deflates her self-esteem. That makes her feel that she's not all that. This is why they don't want critical race theory taught in grade school and in our institutions of higher learning. These bomb threats are by design. They want to scare Black children from going to class and having their A game. It's all by design. And so racism, yes, it has been and continues to be our greatest national security threat. Citigroup put out a report about 2 years ago with the McKinsey Group, that showed that this nation has lost trillions of dollars because of racism.
Mhm.
This nation, by depriving Black children of solid quality education, has really sought to cripple minds, disable minds, and in turn has done itself a disservice. That we have the majority of people, Black and white, not learning how to think critically all through grade school has hindered us in terms of our ability to grow. This is why we look, like when it comes to education, reading and writing and math, we're so far behind because we've deprived our children of a solid education. Racism is our greatest threat.
Thank you for that. I can't believe it, but it's already 7:54. We're supposed to end at 8. We might go a little over. So I have 2 questions that I'm in agreement with Janera and Janice that we want to get to. One is in the chat, but that's I want to end with that because that'll be like on an uplift joy kind of thing. So let me tell you this question, ask you this question. So the National Coalition joins so many people, thousands of witnesses, Black women ancestors who are applauding this phenomenal moment in support of the nomination of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson as Supreme Court Justice. What does this moment mean for Black community? And what are the opportunities and the challenges?
Well, let me first say, I think that symbolically, it means so much. We Black women, are inspired by other Black women. And especially when you've got Black women who have earned their place in space. Ketanji Brown Jackson, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson will become Supreme Court Justice Jackson, not because of a handout, but because she did the work, right? And that is inspirational. And when you see how she is holding her own against these white men who don't even begin to hold a candle to her when it comes to qualification, that is inspiration. Enough said, right? So symbolically, it means a lot. Now, what it also means is, when she talks about her parents giving her an African name so she would know who she is and she would represent. When she talks about, her, like coming from a family where, there are people who are well educated and there are people who worked as, blue collar and have worked, like union jobs, as police officers and in the Army. She's bringing the whole of our experience, right? So she'll be able to come with that narrative and understand the struggle when she sits on that bench. And that is so important because there's nobody there, as I said before, as Anna Julia Cooper taught us. Nobody else is there understanding in a way that Ketanji Brown Jackson does the experience of being woman and of color. And based on what she said thus far, we can all rest assured that this woman is not just showing up in blackface.
Right.
She's showing up with her whole self. Because we do know the experience of Black people who will show up in blackface and not really identify. We got one of them sitting up here already. That's not Ketanji Brown Jackson. May I say one quick thing before we break, because I realized I did touch upon this, and it's something that I think you all wanted me to touch upon. I'm gonna try to say this very quickly. I have been buttressed by my suffering, and what I mean by that is, Janera talked about me writing about what my daddy called the storms of life. My daddy would preach, everybody goes through storms. You're either in one, coming out of one, or about to go through one. He said, nobody goes through life without experiencing storms. And I knew that because of his preaching and his teaching. And I've been very fortunate to have a tremendous career, wonderful family from childhood forward. I've got a phenomenal husband, amazing children. And my mother would say to me, people say Jennifer has it all. And I would say to her, don't say that. And I would pray to God, knowing what my daddy had taught me, that my storm was going to come. I didn't know what it was or how it would present, but my storm was going to come. And I'm going to have another storm. 2009, I fell suddenly ill. On a Friday morning, I woke up with a flu-like fever. And by the next Friday, I was in a coma. I was intubated. I could no longer breathe on my own. The doctors told my husband that I was going to die that weekend. I had an environmentally caused leukemia. And leukemia is a blood cancer. And from the time that I woke up with that fever to 1 week later, the leukemia was moving through my body and essentially all of my vital organs were shutting down. Long story, and I've written about it in my book, Consider Pure Joy. But what I'll share with you is that I had this horrific, harrowing experience with cancer, several near-death challenges, but through prayer and faith, and this understanding that suffering has purpose, God showed me as I was struggling, as I was going through this journey, not knowing if I was going to live or die, that he gives you no more than you can handle, and that sometimes your suffering has purpose for a reason, a value that is bigger than yourself. And in my case, I needed a bone marrow transplant. I needed a bone marrow transplant from someone of similar genetic typing. You're most likely to find a donor with someone from the same race. I have 3 full-blooded siblings. They wanted to be bone marrow donors for me, to give me a transplant. And they were tested and they didn't match me, but they matched each other. I had to turn to a registry with 8 million people, the National Marrow Donor Registry. Not one donor in that registry for me. And that's when we learned that there aren't enough people of African descent in the registry. So my husband launched a search with my family and friends, and churches around the country, social organizations came together and did bone marrow drives. More than 13,000 people joined the registry to be a bone marrow donor for me. Not one of them was a match. But what we saw happening was that other people, mainly people of color, who needed life-saving transplants, were receiving them from people who came forward to be a donor for me. My suffering had purpose, and God was helping me to see, and my young children to see, that my suffering had purpose. Long story short, and it's a phenomenal story, and it's not just because I lived it that I say it. It's a story about how God had me from day one, how he'd been working with me from the time that, I just started out as a little girl, had put me on a path where he had me. And ultimately, when I needed him to save me, he set it up just so I could get the help that I needed from him. And all along, he was helping my children and my family to see that my suffering had purpose. And it's all the book's all about facing life's challenges and appreciating that maybe your suffering has purpose. Maybe there's a reason you're suffering and it's bigger than you. And that if you just trust God and you trust the process, you're going to come on through and you're going to be better than you ever could have imagined. I thank you for this evening. It's been a blessing. I just, I love sharing and showing my what I believe is the calling God's placed upon my life. I hope that it blessed some of you, and maybe there'll be an opportunity when I get to hear more from you all and hear about the phenomenal women you are. But I just thank you for giving me this space.
We thank you for sharing this time with us. We actually have 2 questions in the chat, but I think what I'll do, unless, Janera, Janice, do you think we should push on or maybe just get some answers and send those out to people later on?
We're good.
I'd really like to ask the question about, self-preservation.
Well,
So how do you self-care?
Self-care.
Yeah,
I exercise at least 6 days a week.
Okay.
And, it doesn't necessarily have to be hardcore, but just something to keep my body moving, right? I am learning to get more hours of sleep. And that's only because, I have a husband who used to stay awake until 1 o'clock in the morning. But as he gets older, he's trying to shut the lights off at 10 o'clock. And I was resisting for a long time. And now I'm like, maybe I should go with it. And COVID has helped me not to run around as much. COVID has taught me how to have balance. So, ladies, I've determined I don't do breakfast meetings anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you want to have breakfast with me at 9:30 in the morning. I'm not running out the house anymore for a breakfast meeting at 7:30, 8 o'clock. And what that also means is I don't do meetings before 9:30 unless it's absolutely necessary. And I've established that as a rule for my entire organization. No matter what level you're at, you should be able to move into your day with ease. So no meetings before 9:30 and no standing meetings after 4:30. People should be able to get on home and move into their night with peace. The other thing that I do, which is really big, and I've been doing this for a long, long, long time. I build into my annual schedule that every third month, I'm going to take a break. So I vacation 4 times a year. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm going anywhere, but I build in at least 3 to 5 days every 3 months. So I'm running. I'm grinding. But I can see that I'm going to get a break. I got a break coming up at the end of this month. I got a break at the end of June. I got a break at the end of August going into September. And I'm always out at the end of December. So grind. Seeing that I'm going to have an opportunity to just chill.
Love it. Janice, you want to close us out?
I just want to thank everyone for coming. This has been phenomenal, and I really appreciate Jennifer Jones Austin and all that she brings. And thank you for bringing your full self tonight. And NCBW Manhattan chapter has more programs planned, so stick with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And good night, everyone.
Wonderful
And we
night.
will stay in touch, Jennifer, because we're going to help you on that mission.
Please. Thank you all. Good night. And good
Night,
night to that
everyone.
handsome individual you got there.
He's totally enjoyed you. Totally enjoyed you, right?
Oh, thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.